Hey guys, I know I haven't been putting up a ton of Hearthstone videos lately, and the main reason for that is that I've been really focusing, um, aside from my stuff going on in my normal life, I've been really focusing on figuring out the best possible Grim Patron Warrior deck. It's basically a completely new archetype for Warrior, so because it's so brand new, everybody's still trying to figure it out, and at the start of the season, I tried like a billion different decks, and some of them worked, some of them didn't work. Grim Patron Warrior is always going to be a little bit more difficult to play because you always have to plan like several turns ahead and do some things that are kind of counterintuitive. But after after going from um, like the first few days I played it, I basically treaded water. I had like a slightly less than 50% win rate, but I knew that it was something that could actually work. So I kept working at it, and eventually I got to a point where I developed a deck that had like a 65% plus win rate, and I ended up going from like rank 17 to rank 8 on NA in literally the matter of like 2 or 3 hours, maybe a little bit longer than that. But yeah, it was like one day of playing. I went up 9 ranks, and then I did fall. Like I'm still working on the deck. I've come up with a version that I think is really quite good and very consistent. And I just wanted to show you guys the deck and show you a little bit of the gameplay. So obviously, um, one of the main win conditions of the deck is just getting a board of Grim Patrons. And if you guys didn't know, Grim Patron is a minion that whenever it takes damage, it creates an exact copy of the original Grim Patron. So if you damage it and it's like buffed or something, it doesn't the copy doesn't get the buffs, but you play Grim Patron and you Inner Rage or Cruel Taskmaster it, and it makes another Grim Patron, and then you Whirlwind, and it makes two more Grim Patrons. And it's very hard for a lot of classes to deal with because they have to do exactly, not exactly, but they have to do generally at least 3 damage to each Grim Patron at the same time on the same turn in order to clear your board. And there's very few classes that have spells that can do that, and it becomes very difficult. Like against Druid, for example, if they don't have any board, it's almost an auto loss for them. They basically cannot deal with it. They have to expend so many resources trying to deal with your board, and if you have like 4 or 5 of them, they just can't do anything about it. So it makes the warrior matchup against druid to be much better than it is with standard control warrior. Other classes that have bad matchups against warrior actually have really good matchups against grim patron warrior. So those would be freeze mage, which typically is really bad against control warrior. It's almost like an automatic loss, and oil rogue, which is really bad. Not quite as bad as freeze mage, but still pretty bad. Both of those have pretty good matchups versus the deck, but against everything else, it has 50% matchup or higher. It's, the question is finding a deck that works, that's consistent, and figuring out how to play it. So obviously, Grim Patron is in the deck. Emperor in this deck allows you to do a lot of stuff. The normal Grim Patron combo, let's say your opponent has like two attack minions on the board, or 2 attack minion and 1 attack minion. The normal Grim Patron combo is on turn 7 with the coin or turn 8 without the coin. Play Warsong Commander, play Grim Patron, and you start running into his dudes. So if they had 2 minions on the board, you would end up getting 3. If you have Whirlwind in your hand and it's turn 9 or turn 8 with the coin, then you would get 6 because you play your, well, actually you get less than 6 because the 2 attack minions wouldn't actually create copies, but you can Whirlwind and it'll duplicate every Grim Patron on the board that has 2 health or more. So what Emperor allows you to do is it turns the 8 mana combo into a 6 mana combo, and it makes Whirlwind free. It makes stuff like Battle Rage cost 1 mana. So it basically, if you get Emperor out and you have Warsong Commander and Grim Patron in your hand, and you're not nature of dying like over the next 2 turns, you basically auto win the game. So Emperor is a must-have for this deck. The other key cards, Gnomish Inventor is in the deck along with Loot Hoarders, pretty much solely for consistency. Because the one thing you'll find that the majority of the games that you lose with this deck, where it's not against like say like a super aggro deck that just rushes you down before you can do anything, are when you just don't draw the pieces in the right time in the right order, or let's say you draw like double battle rage, whirlwind, and slam, and by like turn 4 you still haven't drawn any minions that you can play, you're probably going to lose that game. So what Loot Hoarder and Gnomish Inventor does is it makes the deck much more consistent. Some people are running 2 Gnomish Inventors. There's so many cards that you want to put in the deck that I felt like just running 1 was okay. I know I'm starting from the back and going towards the front, but bear with me. Dread Corsair, I was kind of down on this when people started playing it initially in Grim Patron Warrior, but I've turned around. Um, Initially, one thing I was really struggling with at the start of the season was against Mech Mage, and more recently, I found the Zoo matchup to be harder than it should be, and Dread Corsair helps you against aggro. It is like a huge tempo play because one of the things that aggro does is, especially as a warrior, we do have lots of weapons, we do have lots of ways to remove minions, but when we're always reacting and they're able to just keep replenishing their board, usually it means the warrior is going to lose. You have to stabilize and start turning things around so that they just cannot keep up with your board. And Dread Corsair allows you to do that. You can, on turn 2, play Fiery War Axe, coin Dread Corsair. On turn 3, you can coin Deathbite, play Dread Corsair for free. With Warsong Commander, you can potentially charge it. So you can play Warsong Commander and Fiery War Axe for 5 mana, and then charge the Dread Corsair for 3 mana, which is pretty cool. So this card is probably going to be a staple in this deck for quite a while. It's just really, really strong tempo play. Deathblight is obvious. I was trying to play Grim Patron Warrior on Asia and EU, where I didn't have Deathbite, and it just doesn't work. You need that. You need basically as many whirlwind effects as you can get in the deck, and Deathbite is almost the perfect card in that it's 4 mana. I was trying to use Arcanite Reaper. Arcanite Reaper at 5 mana is just too expensive because it takes an extra turn to get it out, and that's an extra turn of whatever the minion that you would kill with it hitting you, and you don't get the Death Rattle from it. So the Death Rattle is super, super important in this deck. So if somehow you don't have the 4th Wing of Nax, which is where the class challenge that you get Deathbite from is in, you should get that as soon as possible. Warsong Commander, extremely, extremely valuable card in this deck. You should never keep it in your mulligan, even though it is a critical part of the deck, because you won't be most likely won't be playing it before turn 6 at the earliest, and most likely turn 8 or 9. So keeping it in your opening hand is almost always bad, except possibly if you know you're playing against Face Hunter, because they often make the mistake of ignoring it, and that will just straight up win you the game. But Warsong Commander, it should be treated like she's basically the queen of your deck. You have to protect her at all costs, and you should never play her unless you're going to get tremendous value out of charging the minions that you're going to charge, or charging something will help you possibly turn the game around. Frothing Berserker has different roles against different classes. Against some classes, like some decks like Druid, Handlock, basically Freeze Mage, anything that's like super slow control-y. Like Druid isn't necessarily super slow and control-y, but against anything that is more control-y, Frothing Berserker, typically you want to be able to charge it when you and your opponent both have decent sized boards and get a shitload of face damage in. Against other classes that are more aggro, you should be more willing to just play it on turn 3 and buff it up a little bit, and hopefully it gets 2, 3 for 1. Acolyte of Pain, as in Control Warrior, is always super strong drawing card. Play it like you would in Control Warrior. Try to benefit. Try never to play it on a turn where it is unlikely that you're going to get more than 1 card from it, obviously. But sometimes you will be in situations where you're just far enough behind that you just need to draw like 1 card that will help you turn the game around, and that's when you throw out the Acolyte of Pain, knowing your opponent's going to kill it. Unstable Ghoul is super important for multiple reasons. The first reason is it is really good against Hunter and Mech Mage, even though Mech Mage hasn't been super important or super present on the ladder in my experience lately. Against Face Hunter, having Unstable Ghoul on turn 2 can often prevent a ridiculous amount of damage because the typical Face Hunter play is a turn 1 Leper Gnome or Organ into turn 2 Slavezuka, which by itself is 5 damage. And if you have an Unstable Ghoul there, they have to trade the Organ into it, and they don't, or the Leper Gnome into it, and they don't get really any value off of the buff from the Glavezuka. And if they can't trade it, a lot of times I've actually like almost straight up won games just because I had an Unstable Ghoul out on turn 3, and my opponent played Animal Companion, got Huffer, and the Huffer died to the Unstable Ghoul, which is ridiculous because Huffer often does 8 damage in that matchup, which is 75% of your life. So effectively, Unstable Ghoul can a lot of times be like a 5 to 8 mana heal just by playing it. That's really good. Loot Hoarder. I know a lot of Grim Patron Warrior players have not been playing Loot Hoarder, but I think Loot Hoarder is super important. A lot of people are running double Slam, and Slam is okay. It's good in situations where you just need to do like 5 damage and you have like a Fiery War Axe in your hand so you can cycle and draw a card. But for the most part, Loot Hoarder functions the same way as a Slam, but it can also do face damage. And Loot Hoarder, like the Gnomish Inventor, helps bring the consistency of the deck up because it allows you to cycle through your deck and get through to the more important cards a lot faster. Cruel Taskmaster is in the deck for same reason it is in Control Warrior. It allows you to proc executes. It allows you to potentially Cruel Taskmaster your Grim Patron and get a Whirlwind effect off, so you can make a whole bunch of Grim Patrons. One thing to remember is, and sometimes I actually forget this, say that you have Warsong Commander out and you Cruel Taskmaster something, you can actually do a pretty efficient board clear a lot of the time. You can Warsong Commander, Cruel Taskmaster, a 1 attack minion, and then charge the charge the Cruel Taskmaster into a 2 health minion. Or you can Cruel Taskmaster a 3 health minion and then just charge the Cruel Taskmaster into it. Armorsmith, I just run 1. I would love to run 2, but there's just too many cards to put into this deck. So basically the Armorsmith helps shore up the aggro matchups. There are games, and actually in the mirror, the player that has the Armorsmith, I feel like, is usually going to win because you generate so much armor from making your boards and making your making your Grim Patron boards and using your Whirlwind effects that you can often, even though you're playing a more aggressive combo deck, you can often generate, like, even off of 1 Armorsmith, like 10 to 20 armor. It's not uncommon for that to happen if it's protected a little bit. Slam is primarily just to cycle. Same reason as Loot Hoarder's in the deck. Except Loot Hoarder you can play on turn 2, and Slam you're typically not playing it on turn 2. In the aggro matchups, definitely feel free to use as removal versus stuff like Knife Jugglers. But it is, like I said previously, some people run 2, but I feel like 2 kind of sucks. You can always cycle them, but when you're like against aggro and they have a bunch of 2 health minions and all you have in your hand is like Slam, maybe Dread Corsair, and it's turn 3, then it really, really sucks. So running 1, I think, is pretty much optimal. Battle Rage is an amazing card. You can basically think of this card as like a much better version of Arcane Brilliance, except when you are purely top decking and you have no board. Then it's 2 mana, draw 1, which kind of sucks. But typically, you can do things to damage your minions. Like one thing that's very common to do is actually Cruel Taskmaster one of the minions that you have on the board, and then use it to draw 2, or Whirlwind when you have Acolyte on the board, and then use Battle Rage to draw 3+ cards because you have other minions on the board. Like basically, anytime you can draw 2+ cards from it, and you can actually benefit from drawing cards right now, then you should generally go for the Battle Rage play. It is a hugely powerful card, and honestly, it's kind of surprising that it's taken till now for it to actually emerge. It was played quite a bit in the beta, but at one point it was draw a card for each damaged character. There was no friendly qualifier, and I believe it was 1 mana. It's just ridiculous because you could whirlwind and draw like 9 cards for 1 mana. Now it is still very, very powerful. You just have to try to draw 2+ cards off of it, and you should be good. Some people do run Commanding Shout, and it is good in certain matchups. Sorry, I'm just trying to make the card bigger. There we go. It's good in certain matchups, mainly the slower control matchups, because it allows you to still do the combo when they have a bunch of really huge minions on the board. But most of the time, it is not that great. And in order to use it as part of the Grim Patron combo, you either have to have Grim Patrons on the board from a previous turn, you have to have played Emperor and gotten a big mana reduction, or you have to play it on turn 10. So it is very situational. Against aggro matchups, you don't really need it. And a lot of the time, it ends up just being you top deck it when you need to draw a card, and you draw 1 card off of it for 2 mana. Sometimes it ends up being really good when you have like, you already have Warsong Commander on the board, or you already have Grim Patron on the board, and you play Commanding Shout, and you actually draw the other piece. You can play the Warsong Commander and then start running your guys in. But most of the time, I think it's pretty underwhelming. The only time I would run it is if there was just like a whole bunch of Handlocks and a whole bunch of Ramp Druids on the ladder, pretty much. War Axe, standard, Whirlwind, standard. You want as many Whirlwinds effects in the deck as possible. So you can cycle them with stuff like Acolyte to get cards, with Battle Rage to get cards, but you should always be aware of how many Whirlwind effects you have left in your deck. And Execute, obviously standard. You do have to prioritize using Execute on the minions that really, really matter. So if there's a big minion on the board that's not going to be able to kill you for several turns, and you know that it's likely that you'll be able to draw into combo or play combo in the following few turns, you should not use your Execute. You need to use Execute on big taunts and other minions that are going to cause problems for you. And I just realized I forgot to say what Unstable Ghoul is also good for. A lot of times what happens is you have a big board. Maybe you have the second charge of Deathbite. Your opponent has a few minions on board, and you charge out a Farthing Berserker, and you charge out Unstable Ghoul, and use your weapon, and the Farthing Berserker basically becomes like a 20+ damage nuke, because all the minions, for every minion on the board, it gets 1 damage from each Whirlwind. So let's say you have 4 minions on the board, your opponent has 3 minions on the board, and you use 2 Whirlwind effects. That would be 9 times 2, 20 damage off of 1 Farthing Berserker. So always keep in mind that Unstable Ghoul, even in the matchups where you're not playing it to slow them down, it's still useful because it is yet another Whirlwind effect. And in this deck there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You might ask why not play Revenge in this deck. The reason you don't play Revenge in this deck is because in this deck it is strictly a worse version of Whirlwind. Deal 1 damage to all minions, just fine. But a lot of times what happens is your opponent, you use weapons to maintain board control throughout the early game, and you get to like turn 7, 8, 9. A lot of times you're at 12 or less health when you're about to do the combo. So it's actually, it would be strictly worse to use in this deck. In Control Warrior, I think we're going to see a lot of people replace Whirlwinds with Revenge, because in Control Warrior, it's the majority of the time is going to be good to be able to deal 3 damage to the entire board. But in this deck, you don't want to deal 3 damage to the board pretty much most of the time, so do not use Revenge. So that's it for the deck explanation. I am going to play a few games and show you guys exactly how the deck plays.
Versus Gul'dan.
For our first match here, we have a Warlock. Warlock is a decent matchup for this deck. It is very high variance, so if you are playing against Warlock and things aren't going that well for you, just keep in mind that it is very easy for this matchup to go very well or very badly. It's very, very RNG based, just based on the draw they get and the draw you get. Against Warlock, you obviously want to have like Fiery War Axe if you can. I probably actually should have mulliganed the Cruel Taskmaster to try to get Fiery War Axe. Typically right now you're going to see like 50% Zoo, maybe 50% Zoo, 25% Demon Lock, 25% Panel Knock. Equip the weapon and then not kill this, just 'cause we don't care about it right now. But we want to be able to possibly hit something in Cruel Taskmaster at next turn.
Stop yelling!
So Imp Gang Boss is actually good for our deck. Unfortunately, we wish that we didn't actually equip that Fire War Axe last turn, but that's the way things go. And maybe if I was thinking ahead a little bit, I would have anticipated that.
Macleod be thirsty.
Again, we're generally okay with him having those things on the board. The Warsun Commander is pretty valuable here, so we don't want to waste it. I think actually it's I could have actually played Dread Corsair there. We may be able to charge it next turn and get some value out of it. That was probably a misplay.
Why do you call?
The only question is if we want to use the Warsun Commander right now. And I don't think we do. This is actually a decent spot to Battle Rage. We're going to do this.
Back to work.
Mainly because it allows us a better Battle Rage.
Blood and blood.
We get to draw 3 cards off of Battle Rage here, which is pretty strong. It does mean that he can clear this a little bit easier, but that's...
Mind if I roll me?
We want to keep cycling through our deck as much as possible. Playing a card and then tapping is usually the sign of a not great Warlock player.
Hey, give me that!
Given the chance, you always want to kill that. Have to be a little bit wary of using whirlwind effects, but since we can clear his entire board and draw a card here, I think it's fine.
Let the pain speak to me.
Having board control against Warlock is really important.
I feel icky.
It's okay to play Thursday here. If we kill this, then it's gonna be hard for him to clear it. Without using like without using Doomguard or having to like power overwhelming plus Dark Bomb. We don't have, unfortunately, Grim Patron in our hand just yet, but we'll hopefully soon.
You call that?
And again, he's tapping at the end of his turn, which is a fundamental mistake that you just shouldn't make. My question, we could actually start charging some minions here. I don't think it's necessary. Let's just draw a card and see what we get. I want to save the execute for Doom Guards because it's the one minion that he has that's kind of difficult for us to deal with. So we're gonna go Fiery War Axe. This. We could have played Ghoul here, but our life total is good and we're not worried about that. And if we play Ghoul, we can't play Loot Hoarder. Again, he fucking taps at the end of his turn. They're probably why he's at 1800 legendary. If we had Frothing Berserker here, we would pretty much have a guaranteed win.
What now? Let the pain speak to me. Bring the pain.
Get a card. Okay, there we go. We win.
Be thirsty. I strike.
I didn't really have to do the math here. It's just, there's so many minions on board. It's just a guaranteed win. You should try to calculate it as much as possible. We'll play a couple more games just so you guys can see. Again, we took board control, and once we have board control, it's a matter of time when we have that many cards before we win the game. If we hadn't drawn Frothing Berserker there, we still had a very easy clear. Or mostly clear. Probably couldn't clear the egg. Druid is I feel Grim Patron Warrior I think is definitely favorited over Druid. It's not a huge favorite, but it's way better than Control. We keep Loot Hoarder. And Despite. Despite is actually better against Druid than Fiery War Axe is. Fiery War Axe typically you're gonna use it to kill, like, maybe hit something twice, whereas Despite and just outright kill a lot of his minions. The reason Loot Hoarder is good because it forces him to Wrath or uses hero power. And that means that he's not using it for wild growth or something else if he does that. Otherwise, we end up getting value out of it. Frothing Berserker, you do typically want to save it to charge against Druid, but like, if he wants to deal with this right now, he's going to have to swipe it, which also takes up his entire turn. And we also draw a card off of it. So we're perfectly fine with that. My question is, do we want to Fiery War Axe here? What's his most likely play on turn 5 going to be? It's most likely going to be Root of the Claw. So we're going to Fiery War Axe over Despite because we don't have any of the combo pieces. It's not like we can make some Grim Patrons next turn. And Despite and Fiery War Axe against Druid of the Claw are effectively the same thing. Or Sludge Belcher. Second charge of Despite is obviously good against Sludge Belcher. Hey, it's Token Druid. This is actually a really good matchup.
My shield for Argus.
He's making a bunch of dudes so that we can charge our guy in later. We do have to be a little bit worried about him getting Savage Roar. Maybe I want to actually save this. Yeah, I think I do. And the reason we're saving it is so if we draw Warsong Commander, we can do a tremendous amount of...
I must safeguard the land.
I don't really get why Druid's like doing this play. Keeper of the Grove, 2 damage to face is pretty bad in my opinion. You have to be a little bit worried about our life here. I would like to play Cruel Taskmaster. I have a body on the board. Means I'll probably also play Farthing Berserker, and that means I should execute something. We're gonna hit this. Cruel Taskmaster this. Actually, I fucked up. That's okay. Yeah, that's fine. That was a misplay. I should have played the Farthing Berserker first. Now he's just gonna trade this in. The good news is his deck doesn't have a good way to deal with Grim Patron. Okay, this is very good because we're drawing Whirlwind right now. I can see it in the deck tracker. So the question is, do I want to hit this or do I want to hit his face? Hit this, then he can kill one of our Grim Patrons. So we can draw a bunch of cards here. Nice if we top deck Warsong Commander. Didn't. So we're gonna hit this. Again, we're not playing Farthing Berserker yet. We could play it as a threat, but I'm gonna draw cards with Battle Rage. Many cards as we can. Warsong Commander is very good. We're on 15 health. We're not worried about dying, so what's the best way to get damage in? I think it's actually to set up for a big Farthing Berserker turn next turn. Even though we could actually make more Grim Patrons and charge them this turn. He's almost certainly going to be dead next turn unless he has a really good counterplay.
I can see.
Perfect. So I made a few misplays that game actually. Sometimes hard to explain things and actually play properly, but we'll play one more game. Hopefully we get a different matchup, maybe a mage or something. The mirror would be fun. The mirror is very difficult to play. It's kind of predetermined by how you draw, but people do make mistakes in the mirror quite a bit, so if you can exploit those mistakes, you can. Paladin. Paladin, deck does fairly well against Paladin. You can keep Slam against Paladin just because of Shielded Minibot. Largely, keeping Whirlwind against Paladin is completely standard. Okay, Fiery War Axe makes this hand actually pretty good. You'd also love to have like Armor Smith, Acolyte of Pain, but this hand is not terrible. Against Paladin, I'm not going to play the Fiery Warlocks on turn 2 because I actually want him to play his Knife Jugglers and stuff into my axe. So we're going to slam here and cycle. And next turn we can play Fiery Warlocks and Druid Course. And Whirlwind. Thanks, Shredder.
Follow the rules.
Well, we know what that play is vulnerable to. And it's actually really good because it's played at Aldor Peacekeeper, so. I should have hit it and then played it so it doesn't get BGH. But if he BGHs this, we're okay with it. Plan is probably play Emperor next turn. I play Unstable Ghoul and I just play into Consecrate. Like if I play it to try to protect this, so I'm just going to trade it. And then play the Unstable Ghoul. I can use the Unstable Ghoul to draw more cards next turn. I don't want to play Emperor now because my hand size is really small. That's kind of problematic because we don't have a really good way of killing that. I actually can't draw cards. I'm a dumbass.
Strike.
Let's counter it with our own. Problematic because he's gonna have like 6 mana Tyrion. Be gross. Probably some kind of dragon paladin.
Follow the rules.
Waste. That's a waste of Aldor Peacekeeper in my opinion. Can't afford to use those that recklessly.
Reporting for duty.
A weapon right now would be awesome. So he's used both of his Peacekeepers at this point.
Mind if I roll need?
Blood and blood.
Need to draw cards. We're not going to get a huge amount of value out of this Acolyte because he's just going to hit this, and then that was the. What? That play makes very little sense. Okay. We're dealing with a not very good Paladin player. He should have killed this 100% of the time.
Hey, give me that!
Okay, we got Grim Patron, which is good. Some whirlwind effects though. Playing Raggun that board is pretty bad, in my opinion. There has to be. It's very unlikely he didn't have a better play in his hand.
Put this apple on your head.
And now he's gonna play Knife Juggler into my. If he plays Muster here and doesn't have Quartermaster, then we win the game.
Charge forward. A fight cold me. Everyone, get in here. Everyone, get in here.
Okay, so we can actually just reset if he manages to clear this. Good. And we're still at 29 health. The only problem right now is Tyrion.
Shields up. Red alert.
That belongs in a museum.
Nice. Being nice and playing that before we play Despite. That kinda sucks, but...
A fight cold me. Everyone, get in here. Everyone, get in here. Everyone, get in here. Everyone, get in here.
Play last turn pretty much tells me that he did not have... His hand is really, really shitty. I don't care about my control deck in the slightest. He's just dead. Deals a really, really huge amount this turn. This is kind of a typical matchup for Paladin. Either they continue just filling the board and you don't draw into your combo, or you just upgrade them. Up here. Yes, please do that. You're making more dudes. He might have Consecrate. It doesn't matter. He's still.
Charge forward. The blade be thirsty.
You're actually gonna overkill him here by a lot. How much health or damage this Frothing Berserker ends up getting? It's pretty ridiculous. You guys can see this deck has some pretty powerful combos, and it is, like I said, you have to plan what you're going to do turns ahead of time as much as possible. Try not to misplay quite as much as me, but it is a very strong deck. I think overall it's pretty easy to get a 60% plus win rate on ladder right now. Even better when you're at like rank 12 or so. People just don't know how to deal with the deck at those ranks, so give it a try. Let me know how you deal with it, and I will continue making more of these kind of videos where I explain how to play a specific type of deck. This deck is just really good because it gives warriors another archetype, which is not stuck playing control warrior anymore. So if you guys like the video, please let me know, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.